but also how can people see a Black woman in this industry who is under the age of 40, who owns their own business and who's been in this game for over 20 years, right?
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the She Dreams in Color interview series. I am eager to introduce you to today's guest, Vanessa Mathews. She is the founder, CEO of Asfalis Advisors. And this is a really cool organization that you probably will need at some point in your career, whether you work for a company or your own business, but you might not know it. So you're going to learn a lot about the value of Vanessa's expertise. But Vanessa's company, you assess risk for companies, and then you help them navigate the potential risk and then how they can be resilient through that, right?
Perfect.
Okay, yes. All right. I love that. That is good. And I remember the first time I met you and I heard what you did. And, you know, I'm sure you hear this all the time. My only movie reference or TV reference was Along Came Polly, where he was assessing risk. That's the only reference I have to it. But yet we all need, especially as business owners and, you know, homeowners or car owners, we all need health insurance. We need to assess risk and we need to have plans for risk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk about your business a little bit and what you do and how that works. So let's just set the foundation for what Asfalis Advisors does.
Yeah, so I'll start with our why, because it's taken us some time to kind of figure out why are we really here. Our two whys are to help organizations to uncover their blind spots, and secondly, we're here to enable leaders to protect their legacy. While we work with multiple brands from healthcare to transportation to retail, at the end of the day, we serve leaders. And we believe that a leader actually wants to leave a positive legacy behind. And so the work that we do in physical security and crisis management or in risk helps us to provide that leader that capability. So that's our why. Our how is sixfold. We have 6 core values that are the non-negotiables of our business. And it's taken us 8 years to really hone in on that. And that's how we hire, we reward, we release the clients, the partners, the vendors, the employees that we partner with. And then lastly, our what is our tagline. We help you see so you can solve. So we believe it's really hard for a leader to understand, how do I solve a cybersecurity threat, or how do I solve a natural disaster that might affect my organization. If you can't see your risks, you can't solve. So we've developed proprietary resilience maturity assessments to enable our clients to assess what their risks are. So now you can see and then make more informed decisions.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot to unpack and I'm fascinated. Okay. But I want to ask, because we do this interview series so girls and women can find women to look up to. Yeah. So we can turn on a podcast, turn on an interview series and say, that sounds like a job I would like to do. So tell me the kind of person you are that fits this critical analysis, this worst case scenario, and that's okay, we're going to give you a plan. Yeah. What are the qualities that you match with?
So for our company, it's really our core values. Be bold, be brilliant, be brief, know your stuff. But outside of the values that we care about, I think it's a person who is eager to learn more. They want to be bold in their profession and they want to navigate in complexity, because every business that we work with is what's considered critical infrastructure. And so when you think about the top 15 or 17 things that every business, that every person has to depend on from a national perspective, those organizations are constantly under attack, from financial services to airports to the energy sector. They also have very complex supply chains. And so it's important that a potential person who wants to be in this field, that you're interested in and you're excited, and you face crisis head on. That's the best way I can say that.
Okay. Now, that is a big, where is that in the resume, right? You face crisis head on. So I, coming from a news reporter background, have a little bit of a fatalist outlook on life. And this is why I'm good at media training and PR training, because I'm like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? Because I know it can happen. And sometimes that scares people. Yeah. Where in the world did you get your, we're going to face crisis head on? Where did that come from for you?
That's a great question. I don't know. I started in this field by majoring in Homeland Security and emergency management. I became the first female in the state of Georgia with that degree. And I came out of undergrad, walked into corporate America, and my first Fortune 50 role was to build a crisis management company for a global organization. I had to go work with leaders from China to Germany to across the U.S. I was 21, and I luckily had a boss that didn't want to travel, but he was willing to teach me what I didn't know, which was business, right? I had a certification, I had a degree, but I had no clue how to help the general manager in Beijing to understand what his risks and threats were and how that tied back to corporate so that it mattered. And so I think a part of it was I had to constantly get in front of executive leaders and pitch something, and I was such a novice. And working with my leadership team to help me understand what do we communicate, why does it matter, so that when I'm in those environments, I can feel confident and not like I don't belong there. So
and that had to be hard because you said it very quickly, but I caught it. I was the first woman in Georgia with that certification. That means you were probably the first woman in a lot of spaces, and certainly the first Black woman and maybe the only Black woman in a lot of spaces. So how did that play into also being so young and international? Gosh, now there's cultural and language and all of those things. How did you find the ways to fit?
Well, I'll be honest with you. So I always say that there's three things that can work for me or against me. It just depends on where I'm at. I am typically the only one under the age of, I'll say 40 now. Used to be 30.
Fair.
Typically the only woman and typically the only person that is African American or a person of color. And so depending on where I'm at, those are great. And depending on where I'm not or where I am, it's not. But, I also feel like I have great parents and a great network. And one thing that my parents taught me was how to build community no matter where you are. So even if my mom or my dad wasn't the expert in whatever path I was going down, they taught me how to build relationships, which is probably how I've been able to navigate my career. They've taught me how to build relationships, how to rely on other people, and not to be afraid to ask for help. I used to be afraid to say, I don't know. But now I'm like, I don't know because I'm not the expert, but I can probably find someone in my network who could help me to find that person. And if you're okay with that answer, then that's fine. And so Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she mentioned that, she's been in a lot of rooms with a lot of different people. And what she realizes, everybody's not smart.
I think that was one of the most prolific quotes of the decade.
Right.
Because I have referred to that many times when I feel as if I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I don't know. And the fear of revealing that when you're already underestimated and overlooked. And so I'll always say, man, she said there were a lot of dumb people around at the top. And so I'm glad that you talked about that and it's guiding you too. So Vanessa, I actually heard a previous interview with you where you talked about a scenario when you were in college that was profound. It stood out to me. You were in the middle of a natural disaster, and it seemed as if that was a moment in time that shifted a lot for you. Can you talk about that for our listeners too?
Yeah. So long story short, in 2008, I experienced a tornado with wind speeds exceeding 135 miles per hour. And while I was inside of my vehicle, my car was picked up off the ground, totaled, and then it dropped. There were no sirens, there were no warnings. It was the first tornado on record to hit the city of Atlanta, and there was a lot of chaos. There was a game happening at the Georgia Dome. The roof ripped off the dome, and 80,000 people began running outside. And it was just pure chaos. And so what I learned in that was one person lost their life, 50 people lost their homes. It destroyed so much between the 285 outer loop corridor, and the businesses were shut down. And so what it taught me was, having this Homeland Security and emergency management background is important to understand and to be relatable. So how can you be relatable? You have to go through crisis, right? And so I've had business coaches share, when I'm frustrated when our business goes through a lull, they always share with me, the clients who you work with, their businesses go through the same thing. And it's hard for them to lean on you if you don't understand what that's like. So sometimes we have to go through the trenches, and I call them the valleys of death, because it has felt like death.
Just kicking you when you're down.
It's like, you know what?
Kick me again.
Let me go back to corporate America.
Mercury retrograde.
Man. But that crisis was something that was life changing. And I mean, as a woman of faith, that was my first thing. I said, Lord, you said trouble don't last always. I don't know what this is. This is not it. So I was like, whatever I did, please let me know so I can not do that again.
Yes.
So
that had to be a test.
Yeah.
That had to be horrifying. And even for you to remember in such great detail what happened and the effects afterwards in the community around you shows that it left an impact on you. And to be young and going through that. And it's a very unique experience to experience what you're preparing your clients for. That's fascinating to me.
And then to not even know at the time that that's what I was going to be doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if they're giving you pushback, you're like, listen, have you ever been in a car picked up by a tornado? All right, I'm in charge here. You can use that in every meeting from now on, like as many times as you need to. So how have you found the evolution of risk assessment and resilience preparedness change in, let's just say, in the past decade, especially with COVID being in the middle of that 10 years?
I think it's probably twofold. Probably one from an industry perspective in terms of the risk resilience, the crisis management, the business continuity. And by the way, those are all four different professions versus industries like retail, healthcare, who need those capabilities in their business so that they can be resilient. So from an industry perspective, I think that just from a business standpoint, there's been changes and evolutions because we're driven by what's happening in the market, or from a political perspective, we're seeing the impacts of geopolitical risks, what's happening across the world, and how leaders and world leaders are changing and core values are changing. We're seeing it from a environmental change, and is it really global warming? Yes. We're seeing it from a cyber perspective now with the pandemic. So there's a lot that us as professionals, there's so many things, the supply chain that we have to manage and be responsible for. And folks in industry want answers, and they want to know, how do I plan for it? How do I mitigate it? But again, I don't know is sometimes the answer. Or how do you leverage technology to help you find the answer? But that same technology could also be the cyber threat that can shut your business down, right? So there's just so many different things that people have to consider. And one of the things that I've seen from an industry perspective is just how do we continue to be more innovative, more thought-provoking, but also more inclusive of who we're bringing into that field. And then on the industry side, we've seen changes from a regulatory standpoint. It's great sometimes when regulations require you to be prepared. But then we also love the organizations that are not driven by a compliance requirement, but they know that it's good business practice. And in the event of a fire drill right now, do you and your team know how to navigate where to go, who's doing it, what happens to my client that's coming in next, and who's managing that communication stream to help execute and get things done. What I would like to see in the future is that we're moving away from this reactive model where we think we're good because nothing's happened, but it really doesn't mean that I'm good. It just means that it hasn't happened yet. To a model where we're more proactive and where we're listening to different perspectives and not just groupthink. I think that's one of the biggest risks I see in industry is when you're a big institution, whether it's research or healthcare, or I'm the top 5 this, or I'm Fortune 50 that, some people get this mindset like we're so great. And great you are, right? But, we talk a lot about, Clemson and Alabama, and I went to USC, or even for the Super Bowl, right? But every Super Bowl, they have to run new plays. You can't go back to the same Super Bowl with the same plays. And so it's no different in industry. So no matter how great you've been, what's your next play? And so those are the things that I'd like to see. And that's also what I've seen kind of happen.
I love how into this you are and how immersed you are, and you eat it, sleep it, drink it, and you've been doing this, and that really is the main way we choose women to be on our interview series, is we want someone called to their job. You are clearly called to your job, and it's fulfilling and rewarding, and you are a pioneer and a thought leader also in your field, which is even more exciting. Do you see in your career, have you seen more women, more people of color show up in this space and feel more confident being thought leaders?
The short answer is yes. Yes. There are people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color who are knocking on the door, who see those opportunities. But I also will credit the current FEMA administrator, Deanne Criswell, the first female to lead the FEMA administration, thanks to the Biden-Harris group. She has created policies and strategies and guidance on the need to be more intentional about recruiting. And so what's great is that there are, for example, historically Black colleges or other colleges and universities that have these curriculums and programs. And so it's creating a pipeline of talent from a federal perspective and drawing more of a conversation at the state and local levels. But also it kicks in too, because in times of crisis, the gap of wealth across our nation continues to rise. And so there's already a multi-billion-dollar wealth gap that exists between white Americans and Black Americans and everybody else, right? But when crisis and emergencies and disasters happen, it exacerbates the problem. And so why this is important is whether you're in a Fortune 500 company or whether you're in a government agency or whether you're a nonprofit, the decisions you make, the policies that you set impact Black and brown people across our country. And so it's really inappropriate for those leaders to not have Black and brown people or Black Indigenous people of color who are in those roles, because you don't understand what those communities face and how crisis looks differently if you're in Charlotte, if you're on, Betty's Ford versus if I'm on Park Road. Those are two different landscapes. It's two different environments. And so just like, with the customer, you're going to put up the right avenues to make sure you can listen to your customer and hear what they need. Serving your community should be no different, right? And so from that perspective, I've definitely seen change. We are nowhere near where we should be, and I'm adamant about that. I've started a podcast. 5 years ago, we've hit over 40,000 downloads and subscribers. So we have a global following, and a part of that was, let's put a platform together that allows people in our industries from across the world to tap into who are the other thought leaders that I may not see at a conference, or that my company may not be able to pay for me to go to, but how can we elevate their voice? But also, how can people see a Black woman in this industry who is under the age of 40, who owns their own business and who's been in this game for over 20 years, right? And so that conversation is something that I'm excited that we've been able to kind of tap into that, and hopefully something that we're going to be able to continue.
How beautiful. What's the name of the podcast?
Business Resilience Decoded.
Yes.
Funny fact, we spelled resilience wrong for the first 2 years. On the art cover.
Vanessa!
And I'm a liberal arts minor. And then we had editor-in-chief, and none of us saw it.
I love that. That makes me feel better about still spelling entrepreneur wrong, to this day, 11 years later. But I think there's a message in that. You're going to make mistakes. Bad things are going to happen, natural disasters and copy editing. I love that. And it makes people remember the name of it because it's spelled wrong. It's spelled wrong. I love that. But what, gosh, I'm just so glad to know you and be in such proximity to you, because it opens us up to just a whole nother world of someone that is shaping our community, our state, our city, our country, our world. Someone's got to do it. I didn't know who does that, and so I appreciate you being able to share. This is a whole job.
Yep.
Someone does it. Someone who looks like me does it. Someone with my background, and we need a lot of other people. And it is so valuable to have different perspectives. There are so many minuscule and major differences between communities and cultures and ethnicities and faiths and age groups and generations that really have to be recognized, particularly in times of need and desperation and fear, because everything is stripped away but we still are functioning in our mindsets.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you been able to avoid natural disasters since you got your quota in, right?
I'm done. That was the one and done.
Good. Yeah, that was enough. I think you can ride that one for a while. And so the podcast is pulling people from all over the world.
Yeah, we have a co-producer who lives in Charlotte, been very intentional about working with women-owned or minority-owned companies. And really, we had no idea that we were global. We were just like doing our thing. And so one day, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, she said, we have 18,000 subscribers and downloads. And we're like, really? Who?
Yeah.
So we had no idea. But then people started to reach out on LinkedIn and Twitter. And it was like, oh, wow. And then so we would start to find out, oh, this person's from Europe, or this person's from Germany, this person's from Africa. And it was just like, wow. So then she started to run the analytics. So depending on the quarter, it changes. But we're seeing a big mix really from Africa, Germany, Canada, and Europe. And then Charlotte is one of the biggest markets that we have in the U.S. Ohio's a big one. Oregon has been a big one. Sometimes it depends on where the guests might come from. But we're also seeing tech, where there are tech hubs, there's been a big infusion of listeners and subscribers. And so what we're finding is when I travel, sometimes I have a chance to meet with the subscribers, and they'll share, it's great content, it's short, you're crazy, which is true. But they also see it as a learning and development tool. And for them, I've heard, leaders say, I can literally listen to your podcast, take notes, and go execute, and not have to go pay a consultant, not have to go pay a course. And as a consultant, I'm proud of that, because I think you should be, you want to know how to stand on your own 2 feet and do what you need to do, and then call people in when you need them. And not every time you have the resources to bring in external help, right? So I'm just grateful that it's adding value.
And honestly, Vanessa, I love that when we hear what you do for a living, we conjure up an image of what that person is and behaves and how they are. And I think because you are so vibrant and so full of life and so gregarious, it's almost like, oh, you can be both. You can be just so positive and happy and also say, by the way, you don't have a plan for a fire, do you, Jen? And I'm just like, no, but we will when you leave. So I imagine the people who work with you are hungry for that. They want it to make sense. They don't want it to be 900 pages on black and white paper, dropped off at their desk. Their employees glaze over. They want your magic that comes with that delivery.
Yeah, that's the energy that you see, you feel. If you've encountered me, we strategically hire for that, and everybody displays it differently. Half of my team is probably introverted, the other half is not, but we hire for that. But the other thing too is what really attracts our team are the values. It's literally how we make it's how we make the decisions that we make, but also a lot of them really want to do the work that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, when I was in my corporate role and I worked in retail, my only thing was retail. And while I loved it, I want to go see other things. I want to go experience higher education and healthcare and transportation and energy and security. And, that's a different way of looking at that, challenge. And so what I think that our company has been able to offer our team is the levels of complexity of different organizations and the different options or different ways. And then also, we're big about what's the problem that we're here to solve. So we can get in our head of, well, we do crisis management and this is how we do it. But the client is not, while that might be a deliverable, it's not the outcome. So we have to really be mindful of what's the pain that you are here to help us solve, or that we are here to help them solve. What is the client's objectives? And then what are the outcomes? And then we have to get together and think about, we have our templates, our frameworks, our processes, our methodology, but how do we put that together for something that is not cookie cutter, but something that is going to align to what they're looking for? Because I always tell our customers, right, if I go into your retail store and I buy one time and I never come back, how long would your store stay open? It wouldn't. As a small business, it's really important for me to let you know that we're here for a long-term partnership. I'm not here for a one-time transaction. That actually costs me money. Mm-hmm. So in order for me to have the confidence to say that, I know that we have to have a team that can deliver on that. And I would say the valleys of death of being a business owner, having wonderful people around you has outweighed it completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference.
Such a difference.
Yeah. Because you're in the trenches. Yeah. With folks. So growing up, what were you like? What were your occupation dreams? Can you look back now and say, I was always the one doing this. That's why I went into this field. That makes sense now. Or was it just something that showed up for you and you followed it? You stumbled into it?
I was always the one talking.
That makes sense. The podcast, I guess that makes sense. I was always the talker in the hallway. My desk was always in the hallway.
I was always in trouble. Miss Vaughn, your daughter just talks too much. And I talk all day today. I'm an only child. I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I've been in Charlotte for now 8 or so years. I wanted to be a lawyer because it's probably not a good way to say that, but I like to prove my point.
Yeah. Yep. And people like telling young little girls, young women, you like to argue, you should be a lawyer.
And that's why I didn't want to say that word, because I feel like it's such a negative connotation towards it. But I also sometimes felt like I had to defend myself.
Right.
Because of the experiences that we've had. But,
or even challenge people who tell you, adults tell you something and you challenge it because it doesn't add up and you just want it to add up.
Yep.
Tell me more information until it makes sense.
Yep.
And for some reason, people love to put that as, you like to argue, AKA you should be a lawyer. Okay, so you liked to push back. All right.
Yes.
Dig around a little bit.
Yes.
Precocious sometimes can also be a negative word, but I love that word.
Yeah. And my mom, so LL Cool J had a song, like, I think Mama go knock you out or something. And
yeah.
My mom used to always say to me, I'm the boss of me. And so she was like, used to always say that growing up. And my dad said that too. So I think I, over time, maybe started to grow into that. But what's interesting is so my mom is on my leadership team. And she told me the other day that the leader who I am becoming, just in the past 2 or 3 years that she's been working with us, is just a completely different person than who I was when she first started. And I was like, oh, well, that's amazing. Because sometimes I'm like, I hope people see or experience the changes I'm trying to make internally and the things that I might not share publicly. But it's interesting to see who I am becoming versus who I was.
Yeah.
Because I used to be, I used to talk a lot in class, but then I was like super quiet and then scared and timid and I wouldn't say anything. Mm-hmm. So I've literally had to grow into who I am, even as a business owner. Like the level of boldness that I have now, no way.
Yeah.
4 years ago, absolutely not.
Oh my goodness. So I love that your mom is on your leadership team and for her to give you such a compliment, like you're a different leader than you were before, even just a few years ago. So finding your boldness, sometimes I think that comes just with age because you're tired. I'm 45. I'm tired.
That's true.
I can't do it anymore. I don't have a choice. I have to do something differently. But how did you find your boldness? What steps were you taking? What were the things you did to be in that? Because I think so many women are hungry to be that. They don't know what to do to get there.
So one of my goals growing up, and I mean this in a positive way, was to never be a statistic. Whatever that might mean in your environment and your city and your location, right? And so I was very adamant about, I wanted to focus on my career. I wanted to make sure that books over boys, because boys bring babies. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't want to go down a path that had the potential to disrupt what I wanted to see in my future. And even though you can always bounce back from disruption, because that's my whole life, right? I just didn't want to go down that path. And when I was in college and I found out that I was the first female to graduate in the state of Georgia, I had no clue. Like, I wasn't striving for that. I didn't even know that I was the first in the state when I applied to get into the program and to get accepted into the institution. And so what I've noticed about myself is I have always been presented an obstacle, and my mom, my mom's sister, I say her a lot because she has, including her, there's 9 siblings, and my dad's side has 5, so it's always an auntie telling me something because I don't have any brothers or sisters. But one of my aunts said, "Let them tell you no." So it's so easy for me to tell myself no because I have a lot of head trash. You're not good enough. Even if you apply, they're not going to pick you. No one's going to buy your business. You're never going to be able to sell it. You're not going to get married. You're never going to become a mom. You're not going to make it here on time. Like all the things, right? So what my aunt's words were that my mom passed down to me were, no, you're going to go after the D1 school and you're going to let them tell you no. And I said, well, I didn't pass my ACT or my ACT or my SAT scores, but I have the high GPA, but this school said no. I don't care. Submit the application, let them tell you no. Applied, they told me no. I scheduled a meeting. Applied again, they told me yes. And so throughout my life experiences, I think when I've come into roadblocks or, hey, you'd be great for this job, but you don't have this. Okay, cool. What hoop do I have to jump through to help me to do that? In my industry now, right, I am the only of the only in some rooms and some spaces, or a very, there's a very small percentage of organizations that are African American, female owned, who do what I do at the level that we do it at, right? My customer is typically a chief operating officer, a general counsel, or chief security officer, or the head of HR. So just the process to get to those people and to establish trust and build those partnerships is not for the faint at heart. It's not easy by any means, right? So through those obstacles, though, even as a business owner, well, you have to be certified. You have to be able to do this. You have to come to this meeting. Well, how do I get in that room? It's $10,000 to get in that room. Well, who do I know that can get me in a $10,000 room? Because I'm not paying for that, right? So I'm always presented with an obstacle. I think what I've learned, and a part of this is just being a Black woman, is, okay, you want me to jump through that hoop? Fine. Now what? So nothing that I don't want anybody to have an excuse as to why you can't say yes to me. And I think that's where I've been able to say, you know what, I'm going to do what you said I had to do, because then you don't have an excuse to why I don't fit. And just being consistent in that, and also finding my voice and learning. I have another friend who's a business owner. He sold his business. He doesn't have to work a day again. I'm always like, hashtag I want to be like you. But we were talking, and he was telling me one day how he thought I should show up differently and be more bold in my ask. And candidly, I was like, you're a white male. Like, you can say that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy if I do that. Mm-hmm. And he used to make me practice with him. And he used to make me say whatever it was or ask the tough question. And so through having great leaders, partners, friends on my aisle, right, that are like, hey, I see you and I believe in you. And I know that people who look like me might not, value that, but I'm going to teach you how to do this. And if you experience this comment or this objection, I'm going to tell you how to handle that. And that way you at least feel a little bit prepared. And so over time, I've just had to continue to build on those muscles. And then quite honestly, as a business owner, you know this, at some point in your business, it's like, I got to get out here and go get this bag. Or
right,
we closing up shop.
Right.
And that last part is just not an option, right? Because at some point, you put in so much time and it's just like, can this just work, please? And so you get to a place where it's like, you're hungry. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it for me? Nobody's going to sell my business but me. So I'm preaching to myself right now, by the way.
This whole thing is just to help me. Because it's hard out here. It is hard. And finding people to believe in you. And, nobody will love your business more than you do. They shouldn't. Yep. But you got to have people who believe in you. You got to have people who will get in the boat with you and go upstream against the storm. But man, and it's such a weird dichotomy of you just say so many things that relate to me so much. I didn't want to be a statistic, and then I became a teen mom statistic. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I can't be another statistic. I can't drop out of school. And that just came from growing up in poverty and being free and reduced lunch kid statistic and not wanting to continue to have some kind of label on me. I want to point out, though, what a great statistic you are, the first woman in Georgia to pass. Like, that is a totally different side of the scale that we don't ever think about or hear or see. So that is really beautiful. So you mentioned obstacles, and that's the other part of our interview series is obstacles. And so talk about the personal obstacle that you feel that you can share some of the journey with other people to navigate them through that.
Ooh, so I grew up with a stutter, and it didn't really hit me of you need to do something about your stutter until I moved to Charlotte, actually, and I had a new role. So I transitioned from a Fortune 200 aviation and manufacturing company working in crisis management and global security. And I started my business, and then I had moved myself and my business to Charlotte. And in my first 2 weeks at this Fortune 50 retail company, I was told that I need to go sell the crisis management program for the global operations to 22 senior vice presidents and executives. And none of them looked like me.
And you were probably very young.
Yeah, I was still under 30.
Oh, gosh.
So I also joined Toastmasters because I just wanted to learn how to be a better speaker. And my mom was also a heavy Toastmasters fan, and she had been in the club. She's competed, so I've seen her and watched her through that. And I had to start building the presentation and working with my leader at the time, and she was like, "Hey, I'm going to let you lead it because this is your lane." And I was like, "Well, you're the director. Like, I just work for you." She's like, "No, you speak to that." So I was like, "Oh God." So I just started freaking out about, well, what if I stutter? Well, what if I can't say my name? Well, what if I stumble on my words? And are they going to take me seriously? Am I going to lose my credibility? What are they going to think about me? And I was just like, well, you got to try something. So I was just like, all right, I'm going to Toastmasters. And so my mentor at the time was Ashley, and she paired with me. It was at Friendship Toastmasters Club. And she practiced with me. And so I had to start preparing my speeches. I think I did like maybe 2 or 3. You get like a 1-minute table topics when you're in the meetings, which it was great because it taught me how to speak, drive your point, and move on, right? And very condensed because there's a timer. And they count your ums, your so's, and your ahs, and all the words that are not words. So long story short, Ashley is coaching with me and teaching me, and I'm practicing with her on how do you give a presentation? What's your stance? How do you command the authority of the room? And what are your props and different things like that? And I came into those 22 senior vice president in-person meetings, and I didn't stutter one time. I don't even know how she helped me do it. I think it might have just maybe been me breathing or me taking my time to just relax. But, I can go into a networking room, like I know my name, right? But I'll say, "Hi, I'm Vanessa." And it'll take me forever to get my name out. And sometimes I think people think I'm crazy because, I have my head noise. Like, you look insane. This is stupid. You should know you know what I mean? And it actually happened the other day on a client call. I was prepared. Like anybody who knows me, I send an agenda. Like I'm very clear about time. Time is money, right? And I get on this call with the client. I was like super confident. I had all my stuff, and I just was stuttering the whole time. And I was so mad. I was so mad. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm crazy. And someone from my team said, well, I noticed you kind of got caught up in your speech. And I was like, I actually have a stutter. And she was like, what? Because you speak, you're a keynote speaker. You have a podcast with 40,000 subscribers all over the world. You've owned a business for coming on to 9 years. Like, what do you mean? Most people don't even know that I have a stutter, but I know, so I try not to lead with it. But that experience and coming into corporate and being new to those people, I was just super nervous and I wanted to try to do something. And I honestly didn't set out with I'm going to go to Toastmasters and I'm never going to, stutter again. I've been able to manage it better. But it's something that I have.
Yeah. And I guess again, a lot of people pull knowledge of things from the media, from television shows and movies. And, there's a lot of conversations about speech impediments, particularly stuttering because of President Biden, who's open about his speech impediment. And so I guess sometimes for folks, if it doesn't look and sound a certain way, it's not. And I guess because it's not consistent with you, then they're surprised and they think, oh, she just forgot her word, or oh, she isn't prepared, or she's taken off guard, instead of the grace, which they should all have grace, but instead of the grace of, oh, she's just working through this word right now, or she needs to slow down and realign. So I have worked through a speech impediment for my lisp, which I find myself even now catching it just enough. But I don't understand what the stutter. Would everybody be able to coach through managing their stutter? Does it ever go away? What causes it? There's a lot that I don't know about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know all of those answers, but what I have observed is some people have their scale of their stutter might be different, right? So some might be very severe, and it's more consistent and frequent and constant. And then folks like myself, it's like, is that a stutter? Or you don't kind of notice it, to your point. And so I think that's the difference is there's a big scale of what it sounds like, what it looks like.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Everything is on a dial.
Yeah.
Everything that we experience is on a range, a spectrum, so to speak. So if it didn't bother you, you weren't self-conscious about it, it didn't come up in school, because you said you didn't address it until corporate America, Charlotte,
Oh yeah, it bothered me. I mean, I just don't know. It bothered me, and I was aware of it as a child, and I remembered it. It's funny because as I talk to my childhood friends, I don't know if many of them remember it or if we just didn't pay it attention, or maybe they just didn't tease me for it in my face. But but I think as I became an adult and became more aware, and now you are coming into business circles. Now you're getting invited to go to luncheons or to dinners, or you're traveling out of town with your team or clients, or you're meeting people for the first time. And then, when I moved here with my business. And then I also was working for a Fortune 50 company. And so what I've noticed is, when you have a brand of an organization that you didn't build, there's a perception, or there's that logo, that brand, let me talk to that person. Well, my brand is what I had to build, right? So in the very beginning stages, what you know about Asfalis is what you know about me, because I am the brand until I'm not, right? And so coming into new circles and having to introduce myself, I'm the CEO or I'm the founder of Asfalis Advisors. Well, what is Asfalis? That's not even an English word. It's Greek. What does it mean? And then I'm talking about the concept of crisis management and risk. And people are like, pre-COVID, I had to convince people that everybody had a crisis. Post-COVID, it's like, thanks, COVID. You taught the world. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just coming into those different professional spaces where I wasn't necessarily there immediately after college or different things like that. I think that's what changed it. And which I would guess would say it was my self-awareness, and then also the expression from other people being in those places. But it definitely was something that I've observed. What I appreciate now, my husband I told him the other day, I was like, man, I stuttered and I was just so mad about it. But the fact that I can be vulnerable and say that to him, in past experiences, I probably was more afraid to say, did you hear my stutter? How did it sound? Right? And just afraid to kind of bring it up. And so I think I'm in a different space. And also I think the world is in some regards, somewhat forgiving on some things, or somewhat open to how people might need to express themselves or or share about what their experiences are and how it's showing up or how it's impacting them.
And it truly could impact anybody. It's a thing that anyone could have grown up with that or developed that. It's so interesting. Corporate America does not have a good reputation around me. Every woman I've ever encountered that left corporate America is scarred and beaten up and just escaped the abuse. It's really awful. There should be a lot more conversations about what are you guys doing over there to these incredible people. I just talked to some women the other day that talked about their Southern accent. And how they, I need to work on that. And I know some speech language pathologists who work with people with speech impediments or stutters or accents or accents from speaking other languages, not just, Southern. And just people can be so unkind. I don't understand it. I'm someone who thinks all of the uniqueness that you bring and how you say it, what you say, and how you deliver it is so beautiful and unique. I just appreciate the uniqueness of people. But I guess corporate America is like, no.
Well, that goes back to, who is sitting in those seats, who's in those roles. And if it's not reflective of the community as a whole, then unfortunately there's a consistent experience that people are receiving. Right. And I mean, that was my experience in corporate. It's typically that middle management layer of leadership that is the biggest challenge. And even with some of the customers that we work with, it's the same challenge. Right. And you can pinpoint who those apples are. But the question is how do you work to either develop that out or build a succession plan to figure out how do I move this mindset that might not align to my core values? But that's something else too, right? It stems from the values and from the leadership. And that's been one thing that I've tried to really focus on in some of the corporate experiences. The values were words on a wall, and certain behaviors were rewarded and certain ones were not. And so you saw different things that were not consistent with the core values. And so what, my pastor said, God is a God of integrity, and we have our core values. So I remember I was out at the grocery store or something and I was not nice. And I had to go back and tell my team, like, hey guys, this core value of treat the janitor like you treat the CEO and treat the CEO like you treat the janitor, I failed. And this is what I did this weekend at the grocery store, and I had to go back and apologize to that person. Because it starts with me. And if I don't want my company to be some of the things that I've experienced or that I've seen, then what is Vanessa going to do differently to hold myself accountable, right? And I think there's a lot of times that as business leaders, pride or ego might get in the way of having a real honest conversation about what's really going on, and you being able to humbly admit, I have blind spots and pitfalls, and I don't always do things the right way either. And so I think that that's also something that our team really values, and that's one way that we show up, because the core values are a weekly conversation. Weekly.
And hearing just that and processing it, it sounds so much like vulnerability is the pathway to resilience. Vulnerability, which seems completely opposite, but just putting yourself out there and building that muscle back up again, breaking it down and building it back up.
Yeah.
So when women and girls listen to this podcast or watch your interview and they say, I want to know more about what she does, and if I would be interested in that, what advice would you give young, let's say middle school to high school girls who are interested in what you're doing? They see themselves in you, or they have the same energy, or for whatever reason they want to pursue this. What steps should they take?
That's a big question. I'll start with yourself and then the industry. So number one, develop your I am statements like Jennifer had us do. I am enough. I am called. I belong. I am here. Because you have to speak life into you. And there's an old gospel song that I had to turn on the other day because I was like, this new school gospel is not working for me. And she was like, you got to encourage yourself. Like sometimes it's like, I don't want to get out the bed. Like I'm ready for it to be over. Take me now, Lord. So you have to encourage yourself and pour into yourself. And I say that because while I am a symbol of diversity, I probably am more privileged than what some people might have experience with, right? So I lived in an environment where my parents spoke life into me and where I knew I was valued. And when they poured into me and there was healthy things happening around me and some that was not, right? But overall, I went to college twice. I've traveled overseas multiple times. I've been exposed to different things. Some people, I have family members who have this experience where your household may not be positively pouring into you. And so I say those statements because depending on your environment, you need to know how to speak to yourself, right? That's number one. Number two, I would say, I don't think that any person should just say, you know what, this is the thing I want to do. I think you can do multiple things. I think if you want to own a business, research that, figure out what that's like. If you want to own a building, I think you should figure out, what does it take? How do I get into those circles? If you want to be a school teacher, you can do all of those things in one lifetime.
I love that.
Right?
Yes.
So don't limit yourself, but think about what are all the things I like to do and that I enjoy doing, and then start plucking them off your list. And what you'll find is you'll start to tap into things that you think you like, and then maybe by the time you're 25, you're like, I hate that. Great. Time for the next.
Yeah.
But all of it is your experience. And that's the third point I'll leave is what I had to hone in on as a 21-year-old professional in corporate was what you cannot take from me is my experience. And my experience is my experience. And so you speak from your experience. I don't care how old you are. That is your experience. And nobody can take that from you.
Beautiful. And I think this is exactly, I created this to be the thing I needed multiple times in my life. And those are exactly the words that I still need today to remember. You know, when we're in that death valley, it can be hard. It can be hard. And I know that this is going to resonate with so many people. And I really appreciate you sharing a lot about your occupation, which it just emanates from you. It's so beautiful and so magical, and you're in the right space. And also your obstacle, which, you know, you're not alone and others aren't alone. And I really appreciate being able to pull the curtain back on some of these things and say, this is normal. These are normal things. And it doesn't have to limit success, or it doesn't have to limit confidence, and it doesn't have to limit joy and happiness. So Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you for being here today. And we will make sure that our listeners follow your podcast and check that out. The Resilience spelled correctly. The She Dreams in Color Foundation has a mission to provide funding for therapy services for marginalized women. And one way we do that is through selling merchandise. We have t-shirts like this, we have stickers, we have notebooks, all kinds of things. You can find all of them on our website at sunshinemedianetwork.com. This particular shirt, a work of art, we believe women are a work of art, was designed by Charlotte graphic designer Dominique Prescott. Her business is called DAPS Designs. And you can see it's a beautiful representation of how we envision women, a work of art, a work in progress, perfectly imperfect.